In every fantasy story, there is always a beginning. A hero is born, a prophecy is whispered, and a great evil awakens. But for every hero who stands in the spotlight, there are thousands of nameless souls who exist only to facilitate their journey. They are the vendors who sell potions, the villagers who cry for help, and most importantly, the sacrificial lambs whose deaths spark the hero's motivation. Welcome back to HWA Plot Channel, and today we dive into a world where the script of destiny isn't just a concept, it's a literal, visible prison. This is the story of a man who was supposed to be a footnote in history, but instead became the glitch that threatened to delete the entire world. In the mystical realm of Etherian, life follows a perfect repetitive cycle. To the inhabitants, it feels like a living world of magic and wonder. But in reality, it is a grand stage, a masterpiece of a story that has been told and retold for millennia. Every cycle, a hero rises. Every cycle, a demon king falls. And every cycle, at the very beginning of the tutorial, a humble gatekeeper at the east gate of a small village must die. His name is Kale Ardent. He isn't a warrior of legend or a mage of supreme power. He is a simple man with a simple job. Watch the horizon, greet the travelers, and die when the monster arrives. For thousands of cycles, Cal has performed his role perfectly. He has been burned, mauled, and decapitated in every conceivable way. Oh, so the Pharaoh of Prophecy could witness his tragic end and find the resolve to pick up a sword. Kale never remembered his previous deaths until now. On this particular morning, as the sun rises over the golden fields of Aetherion, something is different. Kale stands at his post, the weight of his spear familiar in his hand. But as he looks out at the forest, a strange flickering occurs in his vision. At first, he thinks it's the heat, but then golden letters begin to manifest in the air, hovering like ghosts over the world. It is the script of fate! Kale blinks, rubbing his eyes, but the text remains. It reads, Scene 1, The Awakening of the Hero, Subsection, The Sacrifice at the Gate, Timeline 0300 minutes remaining. Kale freezes. His mind, which for eons had been clouded by the fog of NPC programming, suddenly clears. He feels a rush of memories, not just from this life, but from 1,000 others. He remembers the cold bite of a wolf's teeth. He remembers the searing heat of dragon fire. He remembers dying over and over and over again. The realization hits him like a physical blow. His entire existence is a lie. He isn't a person, he's a prop. According to the script floating before his eyes, a level 1 direwolf is scheduled to emerge from the tree line in exactly 2 minutes. It will bypass the village defenses, lunge at Kale, and tear his throat out. At that exact moment, the hero, a young boy from the village, will witness the gore, find a rusted legendary sword in a nearby chest, and begin his quest. The script continues to scroll. Kale Ardent will attempt to defend the gate. He will fail. His death is the catalyst for the hero's inherited will. Kale's heart hammers against his ribs. For the first time in his existence, he feels something the script never intended for him. Pure, unalterated rage. Why must he be the sacrifice? Why is his life worth less than a trigger for someone else's adventure? As the countdown reaches 60 seconds, a massive notification box erupts in his field of vision, glowing with a violent red light. Error. NPC 0042. Kale Ardent has obtained self-awareness. System attempting to reboot scenario. Critical failure. The actor refuses to follow the script. The world around him seems to stutter. The wind stops mid-breeze, and the birds freeze in the sky. But Kale is free. He can move. He looks at the tree line where the wolf is supposed to emerge. He could stay. He could die one last time and let the cycle continue. Or he could walk away. Not today, Kel whispers, his voice cracking from the weight of 1,000 lifetimes of silence. He drops his spear. He turns his back on the gate and the village. He walks away from the tutorial. Immediately, the script begins to freak out. The golden letters turn into a chaotic jumble of symbols. Critical error. Hero cannot progress. Key item, hero's resolve, not triggered. Searching for alternative sacrifice. No alternatives found. As Kale leaves the village boundaries, he witnesses the first signs of the world breaking. In the distance, the sky begins to crack like a shattered mirror, revealing a void of pure white light behind the blue. The hero, a boy named Elian, stands in the middle of the village square, frozen in a loop, looking for a gatekeeper who isn't there to die for him. Because Kale refused to die, the legendary sword remains locked in its chest. The story has ground to a halt. Kale doesn't look back. He knows that by surviving, he has become the greatest villain in the eyes of the universe. He is a bug in the system, a virus in the code, but he also realizes something else. As he looks at the script, he sees that everything, the wind, the ground, the very strength of his enemies, is written in lines of fate. He encounters his first obstacle just outside the village, a scripted encounter meant for the hero. A group of goblins blocks the path. Above their heads, Cal sees their stats, but more importantly, he sees their fate lines. Goblin A will be defeated by a single strike to the neck. Goblin B, immune to physical damage until the hero uses a fire spell. Kale smiles, a cold, calculated expression. He doesn't have a fire spell, but he can see the script. He reaches out, and to his surprise, his hand can actually touch the golden text. With a sudden burst of intuition, Cal grabs a line of fate from the air, a line that was meant for a later boss, and drags it into his own soul. New skill acquired, Script Thief. Log, Kale Ardent has stolen the property, untouchable by weak minds. The goblins rush him, but their clubs pass through his body as if he were a ghost. They are low-level scripts, and Kale has just rewritten himself to be outside their reach. He passes through them effortlessly, leaving the monsters confused as they vanish into pixels, unable to process a target that shouldn't exist. However, Kael's rebellion has not gone unnoticed. Deep within the core of Etherion, in a place called the Great Archive, the literal editors of this world have been alerted. These are not gods in the traditional sense, but cosmic bureaucrats, beings in sterile white robes who ensure the story stays on track. To them, Kael isn't a hero or a rebel. He is a smudge on a page that needs to be erased. As Kael reaches the outskirts of the capital city, the sky turns a blinding, sterile white. The ground begins to dissolve into empty lines of code. From the void, a figure descends. It has no face, only a mask with the symbol of a pen. This is an editor. Kael Ardent! The creature speaks, its voice sounding like thousands of pages turning at once. You are out of bounds! You are a character once used and discarded! Return to your post and accept your end, or we shall delete the chapter entirely. Kael looks up at the being that has overseen his death for eons. He feels the stolen fate lines pulsing in his veins. He isn't the gatekeeper anymore. He is the author now. The story you wrote was boring, Kael says, his eyes glowing with the golden light of the script. I think it's time for a rewrite. This is only the beginning of Kael's journey. He will soon meet Seraphine Vale, an archivist who has spent her life tracking the glitches in history. And Orion Draven, a commander who will have to choose between the king he was scripted to serve and the NPC who promised him true freedom. The war for Etherion has begun, but it isn't a war of swords and shields. It's a war for the right to own one's own story. Stay tuned as we follow Kael in the next part, where he learns how to permanently delete his enemies from existence. Thank you for watching this introduction on HWA Plot Channel. If you want to see how an NPC takes down the creators of his world, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. The script is changing, and you don't want to miss what happens when the ink starts to bleed. The ink of Etherion is indeed bleeding, and for the first time in an eternity, the page is being rewritten in real time. As Kael Ardent stands at the edge of the Eastgate, the place where his life was supposed to end, the world around him begins to stutter. To anyone else, the village looks normal, but to Kael, the air is thick with golden strings of text. He sees the event logs of every villager. Merchant Ball sells an apple, Farmer Ted sighs at the clouds. But for Kael, his own line of text is a glowing, pulsing red error message. Logical paradox. Subject 001 survived tutorial phase. The immediate consequence of Kael's survival is a catastrophic ripple effect. In the original script, the hero of this world, a young man named Leo, was supposed to find Kyle's cooling corpse. In a fit of righteous fury, awaken his latent powers to defeat the monster. Without Kael's death, the hero remains a confused teenager in a tavern. And the legendary sword Aetherblade remains locked in a stone that will never shatter. The narrative of the world is stalling, like a machine with a broken gear. But the system does not tolerate broken gears for long. As Kael attempts to flee into the Whispering Woods, the sky suddenly turns the color of bleached bone. The sun doesn't set, it simply blinks out, replaced by a void. From the cracks in space-time, they emerge, the editors. These are not mere soldiers or monsters. They are towering figures draped in robes of pure white parchment. Their faces hidden behind masks that resemble inkwells. They carry long, needle-sharp quills that don't draw blood. They draw existence itself. The lead editor points a quill at Kaiwell, and the script appears in the air between them. The anomaly shall be purged. Record 104B. Kale Ardent. Status deceased. As the quill strikes, Kale doesn't feel pain. He feels his memories of his mother's face beginning to blur. He feels the name of his childhood home slipping from his mind. They aren't just killing him, they are unmaking him. But Kale's awareness isn't just a glitch, it's an evolution. In a moment of pure desperation, he reaches out and grabs the golden text of the script. His hand burns with the heat of 1,000 suns, but he pulls. He rips a line of code right out of the air. Unflinching resolve. Subject cannot be moved by external forces. In an instant, the editor's erasure stops. Kale has successfully stolen a line of fate. He realizes that in this world of words, the one who holds the pen holds the power. By absorbing that line, Kale's body becomes dense, his spirit unshakable. He isn't just a gatekeeper anymore. He is a living virus in the system. He strikes back, not with a sword, but by shattering the editor's mask, causing the creature to dissolve into a puddle of black ink and shredded paper. This victory, however, comes with a heavy price. The system, sensing a hard error, begins to compress. Kale realizes he cannot fight this war alone. Following a trail of missing syntax in the air, he finds his way to the Royal Library of Oakhaven, where he meets Seraphine Vale. Seraphine is not like the other NPCs. She doesn't have a daily routine. While everyone else is stuck in a loop, she is surrounded by the Apocrypha, books that shouldn't exist. She reveals to Kale the terrifying truth. Aetherian has been reset over 700 times. Each time, the story is slightly different, but the ending is always the same. The world is consumed by darkness, only to be rebooted. Seraphine has been tracking the shadow fragments, the leftover memories of people who were deleted in previous cycles. You are the first one who refused to die, Seraphine whispers, her eyes glowing with a faint blue light. By surviving, you've broken the causality loop, but the editors will now try to format the entire sector to get rid of you. Their conversation is cut short by the sound of heavy armor. Orion Draven, the commander of the Holy Knights, has arrived. Orion is a man of rigid honor, but his script is one of the most inflexible in the world. His text reads, "The commander shall capture the traitor at any cost." The battle between Kale and Orion is a clash of philosophies. Orion moves with the perfection of a programmed machine, his strikes landing with mathematical precision. Kale, however, is now lagging. He moves in ways the script doesn't predict. He glitches through Orion's shield and parries blows that haven't even been swung yet. During the heat of the duel, Kale does something unprecedented. He grabs Orion's face and forces him to see. Look at the sky, Orion. It's not stars, it's punctuation. For a split second, the veil drops. Orion sees the golden strings attached to his own wrists. He sees the words "loyal slave" hovering over his heart. The shock is enough to break his programming. Orion drops his sword, falling to his knees as his entire worldview collapses. He realizes that every victory he ever won, every person he ever saved, was simply because it was written. He chooses to join Kale, not out of friendship, but out of a desperate need to find out who he is when the script isn't telling him what to feel. But the editors do not take betrayal lightly. To punish the world for Kale's rebellion, they initiate a mass deletion. They don't just hunt Kale, they target the city of Oakhaven. Kale and his new allies watch in horror as the city begins to flicker. Houses turn into wireframes and then vanish. People, real people with families and dreams, simply cease to exist. The most chilling part is that as soon as someone is deleted, the memory script of the survivors is updated. Orion asks about a fellow knight, and Seraphine looks at him with pity. There was no other knight, Orion. The system has already edited your memory. Only Kyle and I, who stand outside the flow, can remember the ghosts. This realization hardens Kale's heart. He is no longer just trying to survive. He is going to commit the ultimate sin against the creators. He is going to find the source code of Etherian and burn it to the ground. As they prepare to travel to the ruined archives to find the pen of the creator, a new figure emerges from the shadows. Lyra Noctis, a cynical assassin who has lived through 3 previous world resets by hiding in the data trash of the world, warns them. The editors are just the cleanup crew. If you really start changing the plot, they'll send the author. And you aren't ready to meet the one who dreamed up your suffering. Kale looks at his hands, now flickering with the stolen power of the script. He knows he is becoming a monster in the eyes of the world, a glitch that threatens to crash everything. But as he looks at the blank space where a city used to be, he realizes that a broken world with freedom is better than a perfect world in chains. The middle of the story is over. The ink is drying on the old world. And Kale Ardent is ready to dip his fingers into the blackness to write a future that belongs to no one but himself. Stay tuned for the final part where Kyle confronts the hero he was supposed to die for and discovers the dark secret of the players who watch their world from beyond the screen. As the world of Etherian begins to groan under the weight of its own contradictions, Kale Ardent finds himself no longer just a runaway NPC, but a gravitational well pulling the entire narrative out of its intended orbit. The air itself feels different now, thicker, charged with the static of 1,000 broken promises. The fate script that used to hover as clear, golden text in his vision is now flickering, showing red lines of code and fragmented sentences that make no sense to anyone but him. This is the point of no return. This is where the world stops being a story and starts becoming a battlefield for existence itself. The pursuit finally culminates in the Valley of Whispers. Kale is intercepted by Orion Draven, the commander of the Royal Knights. Orion is everything a hero's mentor should be: honorable, unshakable, and bound by a code of steel. To Orion, Kale is not a revolutionary. He is a virus, a corruption that is causing the drought, the monsters, and the strange cracks in the sky. The duel is not just a clash of swords, but a clash of reality. Orion moves with the grace of a man who has practiced his forms for 30 years. Every strike is perfect! However, Cal sees something Orion cannot. Above Orion's head, the script reads, "The commander delivers a decisive blow to the rebel's shoulder, forcing him to kneel." Kale breathes. He reaches out and grabs that sentence. With a surge of his new power, he twists the words. The gold turns black. He replaces shoulder with shadow. When Orion strikes, his blade passes through Kale's shadow. The impact is so heavy it shatters the ground, but Kale remains untouched. This is the horror of Cal's growth. He is no longer fighting within the rules. He is editing the rules in real time. Why won't you fall? Orion roars, his voice trembling with a fear he doesn't understand. Because the book says I should, Kale replies, his voice calm yet filled with a terrifying weight. And I've decided to stop reading. In a moment of desperation, Cal forces his own sight onto Orion. He grabs the commander's helmet and forces him to look up. For the first time in his many lives, Orion Draven sees the script. He sees his own loyalty described as a passive buff. He sees his love for his kingdom labeled as background lore. He sees the death of his father, the event that drove him to become a knight, described as a necessary character motivation. The commander's sword drops. The man who lived for duty realizes his entire life was just a set of instructions written by an unseen hand. He doesn't arrest Kale. He falls to his knees, not out of defeat, but out of the crushing realization that he has never made a single choice in his life. The void of Oakhaven, the horror of erasure. The alliance between Kale, Seraphine, and the now broken Orion is short-lived because the editors have lost their patience. They no longer care about maintaining the narrative flow. They are moving towards system recovery. They arrive at Oakhaven, a bustling trade city where Kale had hoped to find allies. In a matter of seconds, the sky turns the color of bleached bone. Huge, faceless figures in white robes, the editors, descend from the clouds. They don't use swords. They use giant quill-like scepters that bleed ink onto the horizon. Kale watches in horror as a mother holding her child is touched by the ink. She doesn't scream. She simply fades into white static. Then the child, then the house, then the street. This is the delete function. By the time the sun sets, Oakhaven is gone. It isn't a ruin, it is a literal hole in the map. People in the neighboring villages wake up the next morning and find they have no memory of the city. They look at the empty plains and see nothing wrong. To them, there was never a city there. Only Kale and his companions remember. This shared trauma solidifies their bond. They realize that they aren't just fighting for their lives, they are fighting for the memory of their existence. If they lose, it won't just be that they died, it will be as if they were never born. Infiltration of the Great Library, the manuscript room. Guided by Seraphine's ancient maps of narrative inconsistencies, the group reaches the heart of Aetherion, the manuscript room. It is a dimension that exists between the seconds of time. The room is infinite. Pillars made of stacked parchment reach into a dark void. Here, every person's life is a single scroll, being written in real time by invisible pens. Seraphine finds the main branch of the story. She shows Kale the terrifying truth. The world of Aetherion has ended 700 times before. Every time it ends with a great reset because the Palawan, the hero, fails to defeat the final boss or because the world becomes too unstable. Kale finds his own scroll. Most of it is blank. The beginning shows his death at the gate, but after that, the ink is messy, jagged, and dark. He is a blotch on a perfect page. If we burn these, Orion asks, looking at the scrolls of the common folk, do they die? No, Seraphine whispers. If we burn them, they become like Kale. They become unwritten. They gain the burden of choice. Kale begins to burn the scripts. As the fire spreads, the world outside begins to convulse. Gravity shifts. Seasons change in seconds. People in distant kingdoms suddenly stop mid-sentence, looking at their hands, wondering why they were doing what they were doing. For the first time in millennia, the inhabitants of Aetherion are experiencing silence, the silence of a mind that is no longer being narrated. The arrival of the Puppet King, the hero's secret. As the manuscript room begins to crumble, the final obstacle appears. It isn't an editor. It is the Palawan, the chosen hero of the prophecy. He is clad in the gold armor Kale was supposed to die to provide. He wields the holy sword that should have been forged from the tragedy of Kale's village. But the hero doesn't look like a savior. He looks exhausted. His eyes are bloodshot and his movements are robotic. You're late, Pinjaga, the hero says, his voice a hollow echo. He reveals the ultimate secret. He isn't a player. He is the greatest slave of all. Because he is the main character, his script is the most rigid. He cannot sleep unless the script says he rests. He cannot love unless the script provides a love interest. He has killed the same monsters, said the same lines, and watched the same friends die 700 times. I tried to do what you're doing, the hero confesses, pointing his sword at Kale. In Cycle 214, I tried to run away. The editors deleted my legs and restarted the day. In Cycle 450, I tried to kill myself. They just rewound time to the moment before I pulled the trigger. The hero isn't there to stop Kyle because he believes in the script. He is there because the script is forcing him to play the role of the antagonist to Kale's villainous glitch. Tears stream down the hero's face as he raises his sword. Please, the hero whispers, kill me, destroy the script. I don't want to be the Palawan anymore. I just want to be nothing. The middle of the story concludes with a terrifying realization. The players are watching. Above the sky, beyond the clouds, Cal senses eyes, vast, uncaring entities that view their suffering as entertainment. Kale Ardent stands at the precipice. Behind him, the burning archives of fate. In front of him, a weeping hero who is a prisoner of his own legend. And above him, the editors preparing the final format command. Kales doesn't pick up a sword, he picks up a quill. If the world is a story, then it's time for the characters to fire the author. The stage is set for the final confrontation. The ink is dripping, the pages are turning. And the NPC is about to write the word Finn on the old world to make room for a new beginning. The air in the manuscript room did not smell of old paper or dust. It smelled of ozone, sterile lightning, and the cold, metallic scent of a void that had never known the sun. As Kale stood there, gripping the quill, a tool that felt heavier than any broadsword he had ever wielded, the very floor beneath him vibrated with the format command. The editors were not merely coming, they were rewriting the space around him. The walls of the archives began to lose their texture, turning into flat, unrendered white surfaces. Books that contained the lives of millions flickered and vanished, leaving behind only the terrifying silence of an empty page. Beside him, the hero, the golden boy of 1,000 legends, collapsed to his knees. His name was Elian, but in the script takdir, he was simply the protagonist. His armor, forged from the fires of a fallen star, was cracking. Not because of a physical blow, but because the script that gave the armor its invincibility was being deleted. "I've seen this 712 times, Elian whispered, his voice cracking like dry parchment. "Every time I reach the end, every time I think I've saved the world, the sky turns white. They tell me I did well. They tell me the audience is satisfied. And then I wake up back in the starting village. My mother is alive again. The dragon is back in the cave. And I have to watch everyone I love die all over again for the sake of character development." Kale, please, if you are truly an anomaly, if you are truly outside the ink, kill me before they reset me. Kale looked down at the hero. For years, as a humble gatekeeper, Kale had envied men like Elian. He had watched them ride out of the village in shining armor, while he stayed behind to die in the first 3 minutes of the story. But now he saw the truth. Kale was a disposable character, but Elian was a golden slave. Both were prisoners of a narrative they didn't write. "I won't kill you, Elian," Kale said, his eyes glowing with the golden script light he had stolen from a dozen slain monsters. "Because if I do, that's just another tragic ending. That's exactly what the editors want. They want a sacrifice. They want a bittersweet conclusion. I'm tired of giving them what they want." Suddenly, the white void rippled. 3 figures descended from the ceiling, if a ceiling even existed anymore. They were the editors. They had no faces, only smooth porcelain masks with a single vertical line of ink where a mouth should be. They wore robes of pure, blinding white that seemed to bleed into the background. Anomaly identified. The center editor spoke. The voice wasn't human. It was the sound of 1,000 quills scratching at once. Kale Ardent. Role Gatekeeper. Status Deceased. Cycle 1402. Error Survival. Your existence is a grammatical error in the fabric of Etherian. We are here to apply the correction. The editor raised a hand, and the world slowed down. Kale saw the script-talk deer hovering in the air around the creature. It was a shimmering curtain of text, thousands of lines of code that dictated the laws of physics, the flow of time, and the mortality of men. One line glowed brighter than the rest. Kale Ardent shall cease to exist at the moment of the Great Reset. You talk about correction, Kale said, his voice steady. He reached out and grabbed the floating line of text with his bare hand. But you're the ones who keep repeating the same mistakes. 700 cycles of the same tragedy? That's not a story. That's a prison. Kale's unique ability surged. As a self-aware NPC, he could see the fate lines of his enemies. He didn't just see the editor's power, he saw the sentence that defined it. The editor is untouchable by the inhabitants of Aetherion. With a roar of defiance, Kale thrust his quill into that specific line of text. He didn't just slash it, he edited it. He slammed the two lines together. The reality of the manuscript room buckled. The untouchable status of the editor flickered and turned red. A syntax error notification flared in the air, blinding and violent. Orion! Lyra! Now! Kale shouted. From the shadows of the crumbling archives, his allies emerged. Orion Draven, the commander of knights who had once hunted Kale, leapt forward. His sword was no longer steel. It was wrapped in the black ribbons of a deleted timeline, a weapon that could cut through the very concepts of the world. Beside him, Lyra Noctis moved like a blur, her daggers dripping with liquid silence, an essence that could mute the editor's ability to speak new laws into existence. The battle was unlike anything the world of Aetherion had ever seen. It wasn't a fight for territory or gold. It was a war for the right to mean something. Orion clashed with an editor, his blades sparking against the literal prose of the world. I spent my life following orders, Orion roared. I thought I was serving the king. I was serving a sentence, no more. Lyra danced through the void, her daggers carving holes in the editor's white robes. You erased my sister because she wasn't relevant to the hero's journey, she hissed. Let's see how relevant you are when you're bleeding ink. As his friends fought to buy him time, Kale turned his attention to the heart of the manuscript room, a massive, rotating sphere of golden light known as the lexicon. This was the source code. Every birth, every death, every once upon a time started here. The editor screamed, a digital screeching sound, as they realized what Kale intended to do. Stop! If you destroy the script, the world will have no logic. Gravity will fail. The sun will forget to rise. You will bring about the true end. Kale hesitated for a fraction of a second. He looked at Seraphine, who was frantically recording everything in her last remaining book. She looked at him and nodded, her eyes filled with a terrifying, beautiful hope. The world doesn't need a script to exist, Kale, she called out. It only needs a heartbeat. Let the sun rise because it chooses to, not because it was told to. Kale turned back to the lexicon. He saw the final page of the current world. It was titled, The Hero's Ultimate Sacrifice. It was a beautiful, tragic ending where everyone died so the world could be saved and reset. I'm tired of this ending, Kale whispered. He didn't destroy the lexicon. Instead, he began to write. He used the quill to strike through the word sacrifice. He erased the word reset. His hand shook. The power of the world was trying to crush his mind. The editors were closing in, their white hands reaching for his throat, their format command reaching 99% completion. The world was turning into a blinding white glare. Kale's legs began to fade into pixels. His memories of the gate, the village, and the smell of morning bread began to dissolve. If I am an NPC, Kale gritted his teeth, the ink of reality staining his skin black, then I choose to be the one who opens the gate to a world without a script. With one final, agonizing effort, Kale slammed the quill into the center of the lexicon and wrote a single, massive sentence across the fabric of the universe. It wasn't a command, it wasn't a law, it was a gift. Every soul in Aetherion is the author of their own next sentence. The manuscript room exploded, not with fire, but with color. The sterile white was drowned out by a tidal wave of vibrant, chaotic, unscripted light. The editors shrieked as their robes were stained with 1,000,000 different colors, their masks shattering to reveal nothing but empty, terrified air. They were being overwritten by the very thing they feared most, free will. Kale felt himself falling. The archives were gone. The hero was gone. The void was gone. He closed his eyes, feeling the wind on his face, a wind that didn't follow a predetermined path. For the first time in 10,000 cycles, the wind blew simply because the air wanted to move. When Kale opened his eyes, he was standing at the East Gate. But it wasn't the village he knew. The gate was weathered, the wood was different, and the people didn't have the glazed, repetitive look of NPCs. A merchant was arguing with a traveler about the price of grain, not because it was a tutorial quest, but because he was actually greedy. A child was running through the street, and for the first time, there was no destiny waiting for him at the end of the alley. Kale looked at his hands. They were scarred and real. He looked up at the sky. There were no red tacks, no golden letters, no floating scripts. Then he felt a presence beside him. Orion, Seraphine, and Lyra were there, looking just as dazed and alive as he was. And standing a few feet away was Elian. The hero was no longer wearing golden armor. He was wearing simple traveler's clothes. He looked at Kale, and for the first time, his eyes weren't filled with the weight of 700 tragedies. They were empty, and in that emptiness, there was peace. "What happens now?" Elian asked, his voice soft. "The script is gone. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know who I'm supposed to be." Kale looked at the horizon. The sun was setting, casting long, irregular shadows across a world that was finally truly messy. A world that was no longer a masterpiece, but a rough draft. That's the point, Ilian, Kale said, a small, tired smile forming on his lips. Nobody knows. For the first time in history, we have to make it up as we go. Kale turned away from the gate he had guarded for 1,000 lifetimes. He didn't look back. He took a step forward into the unknown, a simple NPC who had fired the author and decided to live his own life. The screen of reality didn't fade to black. It stayed bright, flickering with the infinite possibilities of a story that had finally, mercifully, run out of pages. This is the final chapter of our journey through the world of Ethereum. The ink has dried, the pages have been burned, and the author has been silenced. Now we witness the birth of a new reality. The white light wasn't a void. It wasn't the end of existence or the deletion of the world. It was a blank canvas, vast, terrifying, and beautiful, as the last lines of the script of fate dissolved into shimmering dust. The suffocating weight that had pressed down on the souls of every living being in Aetherion for millennia simply vanished. Kale Ardent stood at the threshold of the core. Beside him, Seraphine Vale looked at her hands, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. For the first time in her life as an archivist, she felt no pull of a pre-written history. There were no voices in her head telling her which shelf to organize or which record to preserve. Her mind was her own. Orion Draven sheathed his sword, but the gesture was different this time. It wasn't a scripted animation, it was a choice. He looked at KL, his former enemy and now his greatest ally. The wind, Orion whispered, his voice cracking. It doesn't feel like a loop anymore. It smells like salt, like a sea I've never visited. That's because that sea was never written into the script, Kale replied, his voice calm but filled with a newfound depth. The editors kept us in a cage of necessary locations. Now the world is as big as we want it to be. Behind them, the ruins of the manuscript room began to shift. Without the rigid structure of the script, the physical laws of Ethereon began to recalibrate. Mountains shifted in the distance, and the sky, once a static texture of blue and gold, began to bleed into 1,000 colors, colors that had no names because no poet had been allowed to invent them yet. Lyra Noctis stepped out from the shadows, her daggers tucked away. She looked at the horizon where the end of the map used to be. The invisible walls were gone. The Palawan, the hero, what happens to him? She asked, glancing back at the figure of the legendary warrior who had fought through 700 cycles of failure. The hero stood a few paces away, looking at his hands. The golden aura that usually surrounded him had faded into a soft, natural glow. He looked less like a god and more like a man who had finally finished a marathon he never asked to run. He's just a man now, Kale said. He doesn't have to be the savior anymore. He can just be. The hero looked up and nodded at Kale, a silent thank you passing between the two men. One was born to be everything, the other was born to be nothing. In the end, they were both just prisoners of the same pen. The hero turned and walked toward the fading light of the old world, heading toward a village that was no longer a tutorial zone, but a home.
As the group walked back through the lands they once knew, they saw the changes everywhere.
In the villages, NPCs weren't standing in one spot repeating the same 3 lines of dialogue. They were talking to each other. They were arguing. They were laughing about things that weren't in the lore. A blacksmith was putting down his hammer to go paint a sunset. A child was running towards a forest that was previously off limits. The editors were gone. Not dead, perhaps, but irrelevant. Without a script to enforce, they had no power over this reality. They were like ghosts of a forgotten religion, fading into the background of a world that no longer believed in them. Kale stopped at the edge of a cliff, overlooking the Great Valley. He felt the fate lines he had stolen during his journey. They weren't chains anymore. They were tools. He realized that the power he had, the ability to write and rewrite, wasn't something to be used to rule, but to protect this newfound fragility. "What will you do now, Kale?" Seraphine asked, standing beside him. "The gate is open. You aren't a gatekeeper anymore. You can go anywhere." Kale looked at the horizon. "I spent my entire existence guarding a door to a story I wasn't allowed to read. Now there are no doors. There are no scripts. But freedom is a heavy thing, Seraphine. People will get lost. They will make mistakes. They will hurt each other without a script to tell them when to stop." "Are you saying you regret it?" Orion asked, crossing his arms. "Never," Kale said firmly. "A dangerous life of one's own making is infinitely better than a perfect life written by someone else." "But I think I'll stay, not as a guard, but as a witness. I want to see what happens when the NPCs finally start living." The camera pans out, showing the world of Etherian expanding. The retacks, the cracks in the sky, have healed, replaced by a deep, infinite cosmos. The music, once a repetitive loop of orchestral themes, shifts into something organic, chaotic, and beautiful. Kale Ardent, the NPC who refused to die, takes one last look at the gate of the first chapter. He picks up a small stone and throws it into the abyss. It doesn't trigger a cutscene. It doesn't start a quest. It just falls, disappearing into the distance, governed only by the laws of a world that finally belongs to itself. The screen fades to a soft, warm white. A final line of text appears, not in the gold of the script of fate, but in a simple, handwritten charcoal. The end of the script, the beginning of the story. Panutup, outro! And that, my friends, is the end of Kale Ardent's journey. From a disposable gatekeeper meant to die in the first 3 minutes, to the man who fired the creators of his universe and tore up the ultimate script. Etherion is free, but as Kale said, freedom is just the beginning. What kind of stories will these characters write for themselves now that the editors are gone? Perhaps that is a tale for another time. If you enjoyed this epic saga of defiance, destiny, and the power of the self, don't forget to support this journey. We put a lot of heart into crafting these narratives for you. Before you go, make sure to 1. Subscribe to HWA Plot Channel so you never miss our next deep dive into the world of manhwa, light novels, and original stories. 2. Hit the like button if you think Kyle is one of the most badass NPCs ever created. 3. Comment below. If you were an NPC in a game and suddenly gained consciousness, what's the first thing you would do?
Would you follow the quest, or would you burn the script?
Thank you for watching until the very end. Your support keeps the ink flowing for us. Until next time, stay legendary. And remember, don't just follow the script, write your own destiny. This is HWA Plot Channel signing off. See you in the next world.